I want to thank you for coming on, and this is a very special episode. You were my social worker, my first, I think 6 to 12 months-ish of sobriety. And I mean, I cannot express to you how much of an impact you made on my life, my sobriety. I'm here with 7.5 years sober. And you know, I've seen you in meetings, and you've been a part of my sobriety journey, even after, you know, we stopped working together. But you know, you help a lot of people on a daily basis, and I respect it. I respect your journey in sobriety, and, you know, obviously I want to hear more about it. And you're 22 years sober.
Yes.
You got sober in 2003.
I did.
What was that like?
Well, it was a very different time in 2003. I was 25 years old. I was single. I had already dropped out of law school because of my substance abuse and mental health issues. I was living in New York City at the time. And, you know, it was just a magical time because I met amazing people who were all going through the journey together, all young people in their mid-20s. I was at this outpatient facility called Hazleton back when it was on the east side on 17th between 2nd and 3rd. And I was in this intensive outpatient group with amazing guys that are still sober today.
Wow.
And I had this incredible counselor named Jason Rudolph, who's now Dr. Rudolph, who inspired me to get sober and then professionally later in my life. And I was beaten. I was ready to hear the message. I'm one of those very, very fortunate people that got it on the first try. It was just the right timing.
Yeah.
You know, everything came together at that moment for me. And, you know, we had sober running buddies, and we would go to meetings every night in the city. I felt a part of for the first time in my life.
That's amazing. You said a few of those guys are still sober today.
Yes.
What are the odds and statistics of people getting sober, finding sobriety, and staying sober on their first try?
Well, that's a controversial question because the statistics around sobriety and recovery and AA are just all over the place.
Yeah.
And depending on someone's motive, they're going to use different statistics, whether to support recovery, to support AA, to the treatment industry.
Right.
They're all over the place, the numbers. I can only tell you this. For the people that are ready, who have been beaten down enough, and for the ones that take recovery seriously, like the ones who go to meetings, work the steps, get a sponsor, it's almost 100%. I would say 90% success rate. And keep in mind, though, some of those people need convincers and might have a slip or a relapse. But to me, that's still a success. That's still someone who jumps right back on the horse and actually strengthens their sobriety.
Yeah.
So I can only tell you that most of the friends I got sober with who are still doing the work and working the steps and have a sponsor and a home group and are living a sober life and working on their other compulsive behaviors and strengthening their relationship with God, almost all of us are still sober. And that's the only statistic I go by, that if you do the work, you're going to get the results. It's not always the case, because there are a lot of things that are beyond your control. Like life throws some serious curveballs at people. But I think when someone says, oh, AA only has a 10% success rate, or the treatment industry is, you know, rehabs have this, it's like, well, I view success as anyone who faces their mental health or substance abuse, because I think 99.9% of people will never walk into a meeting or a rehab or a therapist's office. Most people will die either addicted or without addressing their mental health issues. So for those who actually ask for help or even attempt to get help, to me, that's a success.
What was it that pushed you to take all those suggestions and get humble enough to ask for that help?
Pain. So I grew up in Armonk, New York, a suburb of New York City, about 45 minutes north. And I had a great childhood. Amazing parents. My dad was a successful surgeon in White Plains. Loving parents, brother, no substance abuse or issues in the family. But I had a secret growing up, which was I was very anxious and insecure, and I didn't feel like I fit in, and I was never good enough.
This show is sponsored by Open Recovery Addiction Help. Whether you're newly sober, in long-term sobriety, or even maybe looking to make a change in your life, Open Recovery offers 24/7 support right from your phone. It's anonymous and packed with tools to help you stay connected, stay accountable, and build the life you deserve. Download the Open Recovery Addiction Help app today and take the next step in your recovery journey.
So I was a good athlete, good tennis player, good basketball player, but never good enough. Was afraid to talk to girls, did well in school, very well in school, but never enough. And I never felt like I was smart enough. So I had just so much anxiety and so much esteem issues, and I was so uncomfortable in my own skin, but I hid it. So no one knew I was miserable. Alcohol and drugs saved my life because towards the end of high school, I got into the college of my dreams, University of Michigan. And then I found drugs and alcohol as a solution to those problems. And they worked. They worked for many years. And then it became problematic with the consequences. The panic attacks, the depression, the legal problems, the behavior towards women. I just couldn't grow emotionally. I couldn't function. And I thought that once I graduated college in 2000, that the solution was just go to law school, become a lawyer, and everything will be fine. That wasn't the case, because from 2000 to 2003, those 3 years were so horrific that it led me to surrender. Not because I wanted to, because the pain was too great. So those 3 years were in Long Beach, Long Island, because I was at Hofstra Law School.
Mm-hmm.
They were isolative. They were lonely. The cocaine and the alcohol and the weed were not working as they used to. I don't know if you've ever been to Long Beach in the winter or the South Shore of Long Island. It's very cold.
It's very depressing.
Dark.
Yep.
Imagine that plus dropping out of law school, not going to class, the isolation, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, and hiding everything from my family. And so for someone like me who comes from a very high success pressure world where my parents are very successful, I'm expected to really thrive. And I had always done well in school, and I've always, thrived at everything in my life. Getting thrown out of law school. Now for a normal person, okay, it's not like getting arrested or going, DWI or
Right.
But for me, the shame, the ego, the pride, the embarrassment, and the fact that no one really knew how bad my mental health and substance abuse were at the time, that exposed it.
So you're in Long Island, you're at Hofstra. What can you walk us through what that depression was like for you during that time?
It's like Groundhog Day, where you wake up and the same song is being played, and you know that it's going to be a miserable day. lethargic, the darkness, knowing you're in trouble, but not being able to ask for help or being too scared. And just, law school is a very demanding, intense world of pressure and stress, and just to be feeling like you're falling behind and drowning. And, friends being concerned about me and me just isolating, just the loneliness, not having other people around, and just spending weeks and weeks alone in that apartment building in this beautiful area right on the beach.
Yeah.
Everything looked so beautiful. And from the outside at this stage of my life, everything was going fine.
Michael's in law school.
Yes.
He's doing great.
Yes.
He's living in Long Beach, living the life.
Yes.
But it's crazy because you didn't want to leave law school. You didn't want to make your parents upset.
No.
And we put this pressure on ourselves. I did this with football. I didn't want to play football in college. I really didn't. And I got there and the fear set in. And I felt like I was living. And it's funny because my dad played football. He didn't say to me, you have to play football. I had this in my head, like these expectations, all of this pressure that I put on myself. Were you experiencing that with law school and making your parents proud?
Yes. At the time, I didn't understand that I wasn't there for myself. I was there to please my parents and make people proud and do what I thought people wanted me to do. And had I been rational or sane or, had some insight, I simply would have realized maybe after the first year that this is not for me, and, and maybe shifted gears. People do it all the time, but I couldn't do that because I was trapped. And it wasn't until I realized that I wasn't going to be able to graduate and that the jig was up, that's when things got really, really dark. And that was the fall of 2003.
Okay.
There was just, in order for someone to surrender or get sober, or I like to say sobriety got me. I didn't get sober. It was just a lot of different events happening at the same time. I was working with an amazing therapist named Dr. Stephen Fishman, who's no longer with us. But he died of natural causes, and we were together for 19 years. And I went to him for anxiety and depression without really admitting that I had a substance abuse problem.
You were trying to play the backdoor game.
Yes.
Yep, I've done that.
Chicken or the egg.
Yep.
We would go around and around. And he was a patient man, loving man. And
did he have any idea though? He probably sees that all the time.
Yes. He knew I had a problem, and he knew that, but he was very patient and loving with me. And it was right around that time that it was quite obvious that I wasn't going to be able to make it through law school, that things were coming to an end. And I was in his office, and, he suggested that I go to treatment, to rehab. And it was a window. And that window of opportunity today, I know is God, because that wasn't me. Because had anyone suggested that I get help or that I have a problem, up until then, I would have said, no, I'm not doing it. But I had that window of opportunity. That window comes from pain and suffering. And funny story about rehab. So I had a bed at Minnesota, Hazleton, for residential. And it was all set and ready to go. I had a flight. I had everything. I had come clean to my parents. I had come clean to the dean of the law school, my friends. I was ready to get help. And the night before my trip, I had a panic attack. And I said, I'm not going. And people asked me why. And my response is really funny. If looking back, I'm not going to fit in there. There's only late stage alcoholics and hardcore heroin addicts. My problems aren't as bad. I'm going to not. So the same exact thinking my whole life of that I don't belong or not fitting in, I said to myself, and in hindsight, I was trying to find a way out because my disease knew that I was in trouble.
Yeah.
So I made a compromise. I said, I'll go move back home and I'll do IOP in the city at Hazleton now, typically that would not be a good idea.
Agreed.
I would never recommend one of my patients to do something like that.
The relapse probability is very high.
To go through withdrawal at home with your parents.
Yeah.
And to travel into the city for groups. It worked. It worked because I was ready for it to work. And I showed up on that first day. I drove. I was crying. I missed the exit I ended up going over the Brooklyn Bridge instead of to Lower Manhattan.
Yep.
And I just remember crying and talking to the intake person and saying, I'm not doing this. I want to drive off the bridge. But he convinced me to come back. And I showed up there and he told me things that night that I'll never forget, that this is a disease, that it's not a personal failing, that I'm powerless over alcohol and drugs, that I have an anxiety disorder, that I'm self-medicating, all things that I'd never heard before. And then the next day on the first group, I met my counselor, Jason Rudolph, who changed the course of my life.
So when you're first getting sober,
first 90 days,
but like the first couple days, or I guess this holds true through your first 90 days or in the beginning rather, but I felt personally like this is never going to end. Like this is miserable. I'm counting by like the hours on the clock just to stay sober. Why am I even holding on? Should I? Well, I only have 2 days clean or sober today. I can just go out one more day and then restart my day count tomorrow. What kept you hanging on in the beginning? And you just talked about, I wanted to drive my car off a bridge. What kept you in the game of sobriety those first 90 days?
Fellowship. For the first time in my life, I felt I wasn't alone and that I had people that were on the same journey as me. And I would take these train rides home from Grand Central up to North White Plains, and I would just cry and process what I was feeling on these train rides home were so intense after a lively group, an intensive outpatient group. I needed structure. I needed to meet people my age who were going through the same thing. I was so lonely. At this point, I had actually moved back into the city. I was living in a studio on 61st. 63rd, between 1st and 2nd. And I was holed up in that place alone for so long. The only time I would leave is to go to the ATM or the bodega for months, 6 months at a time. So to actually break out of that isolation and to be a part of this group where we were all laughing, and I felt like we were at war, like these are my soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted that feeling to continue. Now, I was scared to use, and this is honest, because we would write down our day counts in group, and my competitiveness and pride and ego, I said, because no one thought I was going to be able to do this. My friends thought, oh, this is just Barschi doing another one of his. No one thought first of all, half the people didn't even think I had a problem because I was so good at hiding it. The other people that knew me the best from college, who knew how crazy I was and how I would get into, they said, this is ridiculous. You're not going to follow through with this. I've seen this a million times.
He's the king of half measures. He's not going to do this.
Yep. This is just another one of his crazy ideas. And that fueled me.
Yeah.
That competitive fire. And I knew this is what I wanted. And counting days became an obsession. I loved it. Every day became valuable. So when people don't count days, it scares me. It's a red flag.
When building a sober network and fellowshipping,
foundation.
For me, it was so hard to go and talk to someone clean and sober. My anxiety levels were through the roof. Am I saying the right thing? Am I standing in this group of people the right way? Do they think I'm weird? Like, that's how crazy it got in my head. Did you experience that? And if you did, what did you do to overcome and fight that fear to build that sober network?
I was right back to 7th grade, 13 years old at a school dance.
Yep.
In the corner, freaking out, not being able to talk to girls or to socialize. Because that was a few years before I found pot as my first lubricant. But, you know, the difference is I was so desperate and so excited about sobriety that all of that unnatural energy and fear of it was just not as difficult because, again, I was a part of a group and we were doing it together. I went to my first sober dance. I thought that's the most ridiculous sounding concept of all time. I went to the Soho New Year's Eve dance.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I walked into a room with 300 sober people and I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
But I had fun. It went in stages. First, I had to build up the courage to raise my hand and say my day count. Then I had to build up the courage to share. 90 days, I was asked to qualify for the first time at the Metropolitan Group, which was my home group on 84th and Madison. And it was the most terrifying experience of my life. But after I was done, it was cathartic.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I just had tools. I had people to help me work through I was in therapy. I'm a big proponent of therapy and medication for anxiety. I was finally exercising and eating better. And, but without that sober running crew, the running buddies, and without the feeling like I was part of a movement and I had momentum and I was meeting incredible guys that I could be authentic with and laugh. And that was really, I don't think I could have gotten through that foundational building, that first 90 days without it.
What did you do with the old friends from college? I'm sure some of them were very close friends of yours, but also too, we have a lot of bad influences in our circles when we're first getting sober and clean. Did you put them on pause? Did you have to remove a lot of people? Did you take a break? How did you navigate that?
It's a great question. If you want to know who your real friends are, get sober. That's one way. Obviously, there's trauma, accidents, other health issues, and life experiences you can go through where you'll really feel like who your friends are. But for me, getting sober was very enlightening because there were different categories. There were kids that I thought were my friends that disappeared. I didn't have to do anything. They were just there for the party, or they were just part of my alcohol or drug culture or college, or they just disappeared. There were other kids that were a very bad influence that I had to make very difficult choices and decisions to detach from out of love, and they understood. Some of them took it harder than others, but interestingly enough, the ones who had the biggest problems themselves were the ones that were most threatened, and not only took it the hardest, but tried to convince me that I was overreacting. Which for an alcoholic or an addict to hear something like that, that's very dangerous.
It was really hard for me in the beginning because these were guys that I grew up with. And it's like now in my head, this wasn't true for listeners who are looking to potentially newly get sober. And this is holding them, or one of the things that's holding them back. I didn't want to let go of my friends. But I knew I had to break away. And there's a group of 5 guys I'm still friends with to this day who I talk to every day, who I had to take a break. They weren't, they're normal. They're normies.
Right.
But I couldn't be around drinking. I couldn't, smoking pot, whatever. I couldn't be around that. And I sat on the sideline for a year. And then when I was ready, they were those good friends that stuck around. They weren't those friends that just dropped off once I got sober. They were the real friends that were still there for me. And then I went to, weddings and there for their kids being born. But also too, it was God. Everyone was like, just turn your will over. Just turn it over to God and everything will work out just fine. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted control was a huge issue for me when I first got sober. And I needed to be in control of everything. And then I started to let go. And then now a year, 2 years, 3 years later, now I'm being asked to be the godfather of one of their children. It's insane. But do you believe in God? And did that play a major role in you getting sober?
I grew up Jewish.
Yep.
We weren't very religious, but we were Reform/conservative. I never really thought much of God except for what I was told in Hebrew school. My God was my parents growing up, my mom, sports, and then eventually drugs and alcohol. Those are what I worshiped. I mean, so to me, that helped me in the beginning, that a higher power could be anything outside of myself. And it didn't have to be the Jewish God that I was brought up with.
Mm-hmm.
And when people educated me on how I worshiped women and drugs and alcohol, for example, it made sense. The rituals and the amount of money spent and time and faith. And so I was able to use that as an example that now there's this huge void. And now I have to figure out what to fill it with. So it started off as just a power greater than myself. That's the great thing about AA is you don't have to believe in God.
Mm.
And then over time, the longer I stayed sober and the more I started seeing miracles happen in my life, I started to buy into the God concept. And today, it is the most important fact of my life is the conscious relationship with God. And I pray with my kids at night. And, I have an active relationship with God. I pray, I talk, I practice gratitude but it's still a higher power of my own understanding. And I'm constantly being taught and educated. And every day I know that there are lessons to learn and God shots to happen.
Yeah.
But back to those friends, there were a group of people that still drank and drugged that were really supportive and really loving and cheerleaders for me in sobriety. So I had two groups of friends in my first year of sobriety. I had those guys from Michigan and from high school and from the city that still ran. And I still would go to bars and lounges with them and hang out with them. And then I had my sober friends that I was meeting in AA and at Hazleton. And there were these two different groups of people from two different worlds. And it's harder to give up a lifestyle than alcohol and drugs. I wasn't willing to fully give up the lifestyle in the first year. I still tried to be that sober guy at the bar, drinking his Diet Cokes and seltzers. I wanted to be part of the scene. And then I would have a separate group of friends in recovery I kept everything very separate. And then over the years, it changed. First of all, those groups integrated and a lot of my sober friends became friends with my other friends. And then I think now I really don't have a lot of people in my life who are actively abusing alcohol and drugs. It's just the way it is. I still love them and I'm still friends with them, but pretty much everyone in my life is either sober or lives a sober type of lifestyle or doesn't have a major problem with drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
All of the people that I would avoid back in the day, I didn't want to be friends with anyone who didn't drink or drug the way I did.
Right.
But now, and I think when you've had these relationships in recovery for over 20 years, you don't see them as sober friends anymore. They're just your friends.
They're family.
They were in my wedding.
Yeah.
They were groomsmen. I've been to their births of their children and we've been through so much that I don't see it that way.
Would you recommend someone newly getting sober living those two separate lives and still going out to the bar? Like, did it create unmanageability in your headspace?
Not until the end. In the beginning, I think I would recommend you figuring it out on your own, what works and what doesn't work, and not let anyone tell you what you can't and can't do in sobriety. Okay? Everyone's on their own journey. And I think, well, first of all, you can't avoid alcohol. So that's impossible.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. I think people need, like when people say don't date in your first year, it's like, I understand that. And for some people that works. Luckily, I didn't listen to that advice with my wife, but that's a separate story. I think people need to experience what works and doesn't work for them in their first year of sobriety or first couple years. As long as you don't pick up that first drink or drug, no matter what, it's out of the question. You got to make mistakes. You got to do trial and error. You have to figure out what is going to work for you and what doesn't. Because if you don't, you're in trouble. Because you're going to feel self-pity or my life is over. It's funny, during my first group in IOP, when I was about 10 days sober, I was complaining to the group, how am I going to not drink at my wedding? I couldn't imagine that. Meanwhile, they're like, are you dating anyone? Or are you I'm single and I hadn't been in a long distance relationship ever. Do you plan on getting married in the next couple of months?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And then fast forward 10, 12 years later at my wedding, there were 40 out of the 120 people who were sober. I didn't think about drinking once the entire wedding.
It's a beautiful thing.
Not one moment. And it was actually one of the few times in my recovery where time, I don't know where it went. I looked at my watch and it was like 1 a.m. I didn't know where. I was so in the moment and immersed in the beauty of the experience. Alcohol never came to my head as an option. So that's what happens when you first get sober, where your priorities are or worries.
When did things start to change for you? You said like, my life is over. And
Right.
I had fear around getting sober because I was like, well, the party's ending, right? I'm not going to be able to have fun ever again in my life. I'm going to meetings. I'm going to be sitting in church basements. Not saying everyone has to do that, but I felt like my life was over. That's it. When did you start to shift that perspective in your head where it's like, whoa, now I'm living. Like I'm genuinely happy in life and I made the right decision?
There was a pink cloud and excitement in the beginning about getting sober and meeting people. And I was lucky right away where I started to enjoy the sober journey and experience. But to me, early sobriety is 5 years. And I say that it's not 90 days because after a few years of a pink cloud and excitement about being sober, that's when I really started to struggle with my mental health. A lot of the things that I'd been avoiding my whole life, I had to face. My career was all over the place. I tried acting for a year. I tried working in sales and marketing. I did find a great job at a biopharmaceutical company.
Were you any good at sales?
I was very good, but the competitiveness and the anxiety and the stress of performing was unbearable.
Ooh.
And not healthy for me because it kicked up a lot of feelings of growing up and needing to perform all the time. And so I think right around 5 years sober, I was still struggling with relationships and lust, with being committed and settling down. My career was all over the place. I just kept bouncing from job to job. I was living alone. The excitement of sobriety had worn off. And this is where I truly believe the second miracle happened. The first one was in that therapy office with Dr. Fishman and just, being open to take that window. Everyone gets like a window to get sober, and I took it. Well, professionally and relationship wise, and I was just lost. And this is when a lot of people go out and relapse because they say this is not working for me. And luckily for me, the recession happened of 2008. It's kind of like COVID for this generation. We had the recession of 2008 in December. And I had lost my job because of the economy. And I had a window of nothing to do. And that's when I happened to be down in Delray Beach, ironically, where I would end up many years later. I was at a Starbucks and I was talking to a friend of mine who had just gone to Hanley for recovery. And he was working with that same therapist, Dr. Jason Rudolph, who helped me get sober. And he made a suggestion. And because we were talking about what I should do with my career, he said, why don't you call Jason and ask him if you could maybe consider getting an internship at an outpatient treatment center called Intercare that he was the director of. And it was that moment where all of my prejudices about working in the field of addiction or becoming a therapist or thinking that I could do something like that, because if I was being honest, that was my biggest passion and love, was being sober and being able to help people and overcoming the adversity. And I had so much to give, but I was so embarrassed or ashamed, or I thought that I need to be in the corporate world and making money but there goes that window again, where there was that moment of grace. And I called him and he said, why don't you come meet me and we'll talk. And I met him and he offered me a internship where I would try it out to see what it's like working in the field of substance abuse. And remember when I talked about that first day at Hazleton, where I just fell in love and I belong? I had the same exact experience showing up at Intercare that day. I felt like this is where I belong. And I finally was good at something right away in terms of my purpose or my professional journey. I knew exactly that this was where I wanted to be working, helping addicts and alcoholics. And I did it. And my plan was to stay there for a couple of weeks. And I ended up being there for a decade.
That's where you and I met.
Yes.
Did you have a sense of imposter syndrome when you were first starting?
Yes.
What was that like?
First of all, I was looking around me and there were psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers working there. And here I am, a CASAC-T. So for those of you who don't know what that means, a credentialed alcoholism and substance abuse counselor is someone that goes through an OASIS program, gets their certificate to just be a substance abuse counselor. I didn't even have that because you need 3 years of clinical experience. I just had the 9-month education part. So I was a CASAC-T and I was running groups already because I was doing really well. And I had worked my way up, even though I didn't have the right licensure yet. I was always under someone. And I remember running groups in the beginning, wanting desperately these people to know that I understand them. So I would talk about my sobriety and I would disclose it right away. And in order to get them to like me and to prove to them that I understand, even though I don't have the professional experience. It was a cheap way to try to get them to like me. And I needed to be humble. I needed to get rid of my AA bias, my abstinence bias. I had to stop talking about my own. This wasn't an AA meeting. You know, I needed to learn how to be a clinician and how to work in the mental health and substance abuse field as a clinician, not as a recovering addict. And that's when I just slowly and surely started to build experience. I ran thousands of groups and did tons of intakes and was part of a team. And I loved going to work. It was so stimulating meeting people from the whole spectrum of addiction and mental health from Park Avenue to Park Bench. And it was amazing. But there came a time a few years into this journey where I realized I had hit a ceiling. I wasn't going to be able to make enough money to build a business or a career. I loved what I was doing. I enjoyed my work. I loved Nick Lessa was my boss, and he's another gift from God. Him and Jason Rudolph and Dr. Fishman are the three angels that helped me in their own ways. But I was faced with a problem, a dilemma. I told myself after law school that I'd never go back to grad school ever again because of the suffering and anxiety and panic and shame of what happened. I made a promise to myself. So now we got a dilemma. Because if I want to move forward in my career and eventually start a private practice and blossom and grow, I have to go back to graduate school. So what am I to do? Well, this is where all the people in my family, my friends, my recovery community, everyone gave me the courage and the inspiration to go for it. And you know what the funny thing is? Going back to grad school in recovery as an adult, as a 30-year-old, going back to get my master's in social work at Fordham, walking in there was a polar opposite experience of going to law school. I loved it. I fit in. I had been working in the field for many years, so I knew the language. I specialized in clinical work and substance abuse there. But also, when you get a social work degree, you get exposed to everything.
One thing I want to go back on that you mentioned, when you got into the field, you kind of had to change your way of thinking more so to an open-minded approach to things. Before you talked about, relapse and like, it's okay. It's part of your journey. Obviously, of course, if you make it back. In a lot of self-help meetings that I go to, it's like, no, relapse is not an option. I mean, you're not going to tell people, oh yeah, well, if you want to go use, you can go use. I get that. But it's more in the treatment world, it's more loving and caring. I mean, you were my social worker. You were like very loving, caring, gentle. My sponsor is very structured. It's completely different. Why do they use that approach?
Well, they're two different worlds. One is and they're both beautiful, amazing programs and worlds. The AA world and the clinical, if you want, treatment center or therapy or mental health, substance abuse. I think for me personally, I had to open my mind to the idea that AA doesn't work for everyone and abstinence doesn't work for everyone. And just because it worked for me does not mean it's going to work for my patients or my clients. Mm-hmm. And to use a more holistic approach to meet people where they're at and to explore the idea of moderation, of other programs, of other avenues that just for people in AA, it's too threatening or scary or difficult because AA works for them. Once I learned a clinical definition of relapse that I had never heard before, it really changed my opinion. So the definition I was taught was a relapse is a full return to a previous condition once a sincere attempt at recovery has been made. So there's two key elements: full return to a previous condition, and then the second one, sincere attempt at recovery has been made. If we go by that definition, 99% of relapses don't occur. They're not actual relapses.
I've had a relapse and there were steps that I didn't work in the program.
Wasn't a relapse.
Because it wasn't
You hadn't yet
an attempt.
completely given yourself to the program of recovery.
Wow.
You weren't sincere about it. It was a lapse, a convincer, a whatever you want to call it, a prolapse.
Mm-hmm.
People throw around the word relapse. I'm a chronic relapser. You'll hear someone say that. Well, are you? Have you ever really given yourself a sincere attempt at or completely given yourself to the program of recovery? And is it a full return? If you were drinking or drugging in a way that was killing you and you had 2 glasses of wine and you have to restart your day count, it can be very shaming. So I think both approaches work depending on who you are. But AA is a very small portion of the population that believes that abstinence works for them and they need to based on their alcoholism or addiction. They have primary diagnoses for substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people I work with are primary mental health, secondary substance abuse. So for them, that wouldn't work, going to AA or being totally abstinent. That actually might be worse because of the shame and the feeling of failure.
Yeah.
So I think as a clinician over the, almost 20 years of working in the field, I chip away at that AA or abstinence bias every day. And I feel like that's what separates a good clinician from one that might not be as good, is people who haven't worked on their own biases or chipped away at their ideas that only one way works.
Did this open-minded approach start to impact you in other areas of your life?
All areas of my life. I started to be less rigid, more open-minded. I think it helped me to get over my fear of commitment and getting married, having children. There's not one way to raise kids. Being more open-minded about my lifestyle, like how I treat my body and exercise and my nutrition. It's just, I'm just a sponge for learning and I'm always teachable, but I'm very skeptical about things that are rigid or black and white and have to be a certain way. Or I'm told that I can only do things one way. So I'm learning to be open-minded with every aspect of my life, not just abstinence or substance. Now, for me, abstinence is the only option. It is out of the question for me to practice moderation, but I learned that myself. That doesn't mean that's for other people.
Right. I've met so many people who were heroin addicts, fentanyl addicts, meth, crack, and every once in a while they have a drink. And I want to clarify for the audience, I am not saying it's okay for everyone. I'm just saying there's not one way to recover.
No. Would I recommend them having a drink? No. It's probably not the greatest idea, but to shame them or to tell them that they're doing something wrong, or if it works for them, if they're able to successfully moderate harms reduction, go from heroin to just smoking weed or alcohol, good for them. Great. Much better option. If they're not able to do that and they crash and burn, then that's also great if they don't die and if they become convinced that abstinence is for them.
Dude, I do a full return to that old way every time. I've had a number of relapses and it's like, I'm just going to go out and drink. I've tried sobriety every way possible because I'm very prideful. I'm hard-headed. I'm thick-skulled. Like I need to prove to myself. And when I go and pick up a drink, then, maybe that first night I'll have a couple drinks. And I'm like, well, all right, I did it successfully. Like that's like a normal person way to drink, right? And then I'm blacking out just on the weekends. Then I'm blacking out every day.
Right.
Then who's staying out till 7 a.m? Then let's get some oxys. It's just one time, one night. Every time I go back, like I'm doing oxys, maybe smoking crack, whatever it is, I have a full return every single time. Abstinence is the only way. And that is because I've proven it to myself over and over and over again.
Yep. I would consider those convincers and growth opportunities, not necessarily because relapse has such a negative connotation.
Yeah.
You needed to go through every single one of those experiences to get to where you are today, to be fully convinced and to finally surrender. So to me, that I don't see you as a guy who had tons of relapses or like I see you as someone who needed to learn each time what it is that you're not addressing.
Mm.
Well, that's how I would frame it. I see them as prolapses, positive events, because you didn't die and you ended up coming back.
This is great. I'm getting therapy here too. What else you want to talk about now?
But back to Fordham.
Yeah.
So it was an exciting moment in my life, but one of the most difficult to be for anyone who's been in graduate school and working full time at the same time. It's really stressful. I also had a wife.
Oh, you were married at this time?
A baby daughter. Wow. A dog, a puppy.
Full boat.
We were all living in a little studio near Fordham. And yet I wouldn't have traded it for any other time in my life, even though it was insane. And what happened was once I got my MSW, I fully felt like I belonged at Intercare. And I felt like I was working towards something which was eventually the LCSW, which was my ticket to finally break away and start my own private practice. I'm eternally grateful for Nick Lessa, who
at Intercare,
the head of Intercare, the clinical director, who became like a father to me, a professional mentor, role model, believed in me, invested in me, allowed me to start a private practice on the side after many years of working there, and was just, I wouldn't be where I am today without him. He taught me everything. So imagine how exciting after 10 years of working at an outpatient substance abuse treatment center with all of the stress and the paperwork and because you're licensed by the state and the joys, but also the challenge of, it's for anyone listening who's ever known anyone, or it is very hard working in an agency, an outpatient or residential. So the moment where I left, even though it was very difficult and it was sad, it's like leaving a family, and, Nick is still grieving. It was difficult to leave. The moment when you start your own business and your own private practice after your entire life of working for people and working under very stressful politics and logistics, it's unbelievable. And especially for me at that stage in my life where I now was married and, I had a daughter and I had this amazing office on the Upper East Side and all those relationships that I had built over that decade, the reputation, the relationships were all coming back to refer me patients. And I got to pick and choose who I work with. And I didn't have to only talk about substance abuse. My first patient that was just mental health, it was like, what a relief to finally talk about something other than addiction.
Yeah.
But those were glory years up until COVID in that office. And I ran groups and I shared an office space with about 7 or 8 other therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, trauma specialists, couples specialists. And we all were independent businesses, but we all shared a hall, and it was amazing. It was a glorious time in New York City from around 2018 to 2017 or 18 to 2020 to when COVID hit.
COVID hits.
COVID hits.
Everything is virtual.
Luckily for me, I had already been working with a bunch of college students throughout the country virtually, and I was already used to doing it. But yes, what a major change to get out of the office. The office shut down, and all of my now relationships were through a screen. Very difficult adjustment. Lucky for us, we're not dentists,
Of course.
Very few people got to work and continue their businesses like we did. So we're very grateful therapists. The problem is that over time, you yearn to want to be back in person and see people face to face and experience the 3-dimension of being in the room. So I went back to the office. Technically, COVID was lifting, but no one was coming back. Some people wanted to come back, but wanted both of us to wear masks. I wasn't comfortable with that. So here I am sitting in this office, spending a lot of money on rent, as you know how much rent is in New York City, and no one's coming back. And I'm sitting there on my laptop in this office all by myself doing therapy all day long. That's when I was like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? So my wife and I made an amazing decision to move out of New York, which was inconceivable 6 months before. I was in the New York City bubble that no place could ever exist outside New York City.
Yep. Yeah.
I had been there for 20 years. We started to open our minds to the idea that you can actually live in other places.
Right.
And since my wife went to Lynn University and I grew up coming to Delray to visit my grandparents, and there was a huge recovery community down here, and a bunch of us were moving from New York at the same time, we all moved down here 3 years ago. And besides getting sober and meeting my wife, it was one of the best decisions of all time, and working in the field, of course.
Yeah. Now, are all your clients, well, you've obviously reestablished your practice down here. Are you still seeing a lot of your old patients virtually?
So I'm dually licensed, both in New York and Florida now.
Yep.
I would say 90% of my business is still virtual New York.
Wow.
Because for them, they don't care where I am. They would prefer that I was in New York to see me once in a while, and I still get up to visit my family and see my patients up there. But they've gotten used to the virtual aspect of therapy, and it works beautifully.
Yeah.
Now, I do have this amazing new office space called CoSpace down in Delray, which is a chain of, it's like WeWorks, where you rent out space as needed. And I do see a couple of local Floridians in person, but even a lot of the times I meet people in Florida, they still want to do virtual because of their lifestyle or schedule.
Yeah, it's more convenient.
So I'm looking to build a bigger presence down here in Florida. I'm starting to network again, starting to collaborate, and all the things I loved doing in New York before COVID, the dinners, the networking events, the meeting other specialists in the field and feeling like you're a part of a networking team, that died during COVID. It was very lonely.
It's harder to get back into it.
For people in private practice working from home, you can get very isolated and lonely. So that's my mission over the last, it's really blossomed though, at least over the last year, is meeting new therapists and joining organizations and networking events and feeling like you're a part of a team down here.
Yeah. What does life look like for you today in sobriety? Someone who is clean and sober.
So when I give you a glimpse, we want to talk about rise above and adversity. Let's give not only a glimpse of what a day looks like today, but let's also compare that to what my day looked like a week before I went into treatment in October of 2003. So today I wake up and actually make my bed and pray, because that's what works for me. And it's just a great way to start the day. I actually wake up in a bed where I know who's in it next to me, my wife. I know where I was last night, and I don't wake up with hangovers anymore. Someone once said if no hangovers were the only benefit of sobriety, that they would sign up for it. So then I get to spend time with my 3 children in the morning, which is a great way to start the day. It's a little chaotic in a household where you have 3 children under the age of 10, trying to get them ready for school, but that's a whole nother story. And then I have my golden retriever, Sky, and we sit in my office together and do virtual therapy, which is awesome most days. One day a week, I head down to downtown Delray to that office to see people in person. And I'm able to use a hybrid approach with AA meetings, where I go to in-person meetings in Boca Del Rey. And then I also can go to some Zoom meetings up in New York City from my living room and stay connected to my groups there.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I work out, as much as I can. I eat well. I'm obsessed with tennis. It's a huge tennis culture down here. Golf is the other one, but that takes up too much time, and I don't have a place to play. So, tennis was one of my first loves growing up, and I do it here, and I'm a part of that fellowship.
You got that competitive edge.
Definitely. It's an outlet, but it's also camaraderie. Yeah. I'm a part of a team. I play for the community, our club team. And, I look around, I have this beautiful home and this beautiful community of young families. The weather is amazing all year round. I don't mind the heat. I've gotten used to it. And what a lifestyle down here. I mean, the focus on health and wellness. Mm-hmm. I have a therapist / supervisor that I speak to process my cases and also my personal life, named Lee Kassan, who's amazing, who I met at Intercare. And I have, my life revolves around my children right now. And I get to re-experience life through them. My inner child. I love kids to begin with, and I have an inner child, but for me, watching them grow up and going through the things that I went through and having the tools to help them is reparative. It's helping me to experience the things that I went through. And my daughter struggles with worry and anxiety, and we're able to give her support and tools that I never had growing up. So it's almost like I'm reliving my childhood through them. And I just love every day experiencing life through their lenses. The excitement. My youngest one is obsessed with sports. He's 6 years old. It's like my mini me. We sit there and watch Knicks games together and Mets games together. And
it's amazing.
I go to all of his sporting events. And it's like, what a gift. My middle child, I coached his basketball team this year. You would have thought it was a college basketball experience, like a we got so into it.
Yeah, that's great.
It was so much fun. It was the highlight of my week. Yeah. Is coaching first grade basketball.
Dude, those moments with your children, I mean, the joy I get from spending time with my daughter is that joy, that feeling is what I chased for so long with drugs and alcohol, just to feel good, feel whole. Life is full.
It's dopamine and excitement and euphoria that you can never replicate with drugs and alcohol. We always wanted that. Mm-hmm. I think most people are obsessed with their kids and love their kids. And I shouldn't say the majority of people love their kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for us, there's a different layer because I should be dead. I didn't think I'd make it to 30. I didn't think I'd ever be in a marriage, let alone deserve to be in a marriage. Having children was inconceivable back in 03. Because back in 03, I woke up and my first word was fuck. That was there was no praying or making the bed. There was Groundhog Day misery.
I'm still alive.
Yes, I have to go through, I'm still alive, and now I have to deal with this misery again. No job, no relationship, not a good connection with my parents right now because I'm isolating and running. Loneliness, isolation, darkness, nothing. No purpose, no drive, here I am, 25 years old, a graduate of one of the greatest universities on the planet. All of my friends are getting married, settling down, thriving in their career. Most of them have at least slowed down with the drinking and the drugging. And here I am getting worse. So when I wake up now, there's a difference when you don't. I didn't think this was ever possible. And now God has blessed me with 3 children and a beautiful wife and, great relationship with my parents. They come down here all the time. They'll never leave New York.
It's amazing.
My mother-in-law lives with us now. She's French. She's like one of my best friends. She's amazing.
That's amazing.
They have a grandma that they get to experience every day. My parents are also very, very involved in their lives.
Yeah.
And, my middle child, Leo, is very special to me because he's the middle child and he's more introverted and he's not as attention seeking as Alex, the youngest one. And, but we're very close, and he's scared about going to sleepaway camp for the first time this summer, but he's excited, and his sister's going to be there. And every night, or not every night, but we talk about the invisible string it's like a children's book where there's an invisible string between me and God, and also me and Leo, even when I'm not there, that we're always connected and always tethered. And that when he's scared this summer, all he has to do is remember what we talked about. Nights were so awful back in the day with active use. Tonight, now the nights are, I get to unwind. I get to put my kids to bed and pray with them. We do gratitude lists every night. What a life. And I honestly think that when you find something you love to do in your career, when you find your purpose, I'm not going to say you never have to work another day in your life because I think that's a bit extreme. But what a gift to actually feel confident and competent and love what you do. And most days I don't feel like I'm working. I'm doing what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
To help people. To use my experience to help people. It wasn't all for naught, everything I went through. And there were some really, really dark times. There was one particular chapter that I left out, which doesn't really need to be. I just want to give you an example that I did some really horrible things to my friends in law school, and crossed some lines and hurt people in ways that to this day are unimaginable. And I always wondered, why am I doing this? Like, what is the message or meaning of this? And today I use those experiences to keep me sober and to help others. And, now I have a daughter now. So I have to, lead by example and model for her how to treat women and how to be a good husband and Keep her away from guys like me when I was young. No, it's all good, even when it's not good.
Yeah.
Even when there are dark days and financial issues or health issues, or, it's still all good.
You can get through it no matter what today.
Yes.
Sober, clear-minded.
Yes.
If you could go back and give some words of encouragement to the younger Michael who was riddled with anxiety and the younger Michael who didn't fit in with anyone, what piece of advice would you give that Michael?
The first piece of advice is I would educate him that you have an anxiety disorder and that it's a chemical imbalance and that you are a perfectly normal, healthy person that just has a imbalance that causes you to live in the future and worry, and that it's a condition that's treatable through therapy, through medication, through mindfulness, through behavioral modifications. Then I would validate his feelings and let him know that it's okay, and that I understand you, and that you are perfect the way you are, that you are that all is going to be well, and that whatever you're worried about is either fear of not getting something that you want or losing something that you have, and that there are solutions. There is a way out where you don't have to hurt yourself or self-medicate with chemicals, with fantasy, with lust, with video games, with iPad, or they didn't have that back then, but
yeah,
that the solution is to come back to the moment where all is well. And I would introduce meditation, which has been a huge part of my journey as well, which I didn't mention. Someone once said that meditation is as important to them as drinking water or eating food. I'm not at that level, but the ability to observe, the ability to mindfully come back to the moment and focus on your breath is something that is indispensable for me and for that younger version of myself. And all of that being said, I still would want my younger self to have experienced what I experienced, to seek a solution. Now, that's funny that you mentioned that. It's hard for me to imagine me wanting my children to self-medicate and go down the same path as I did. I wouldn't want that for them. But what I do want is for them to experience life on life's terms and go on their own journey. And I will share when they are old enough this interview or honest, open conversations with them about my relationship with mental health and anxiety and depression and how I turned to drugs and alcohol as a solution. And it worked. That's the problem with drugs and alcohol, is it works.
It does, but you are a very small percentage of the people who do make it and find sobriety. So the odds are heavily against you living the life on life's terms.
I give my parents a ton of credit for the way I was raised and the values and the love and I think that played a huge part in it. And I think the angels that were put in my life by God, the counselors, the therapists, the sober guys and girls that I got sober with, the meetings, the fellowship. I mean, it was all divinely put in my life. And I am very lucky, but I'm also an example that if you do this work, if you surrender and let go and ask for help, you will be okay. It's possible. You just have to envision and imagine what a life would be without drugs and alcohol. You have to imagine that there is another way. You have to open your mind to it, or else it's not going to work. And you have to have blind faith. Someone once told me it's like walking around a room with the lights out at night when you're looking for the bathroom, and you just keep walking and
it's the worst.
You have to have blind faith in the simple mechanics of getting sober and getting help with mental health help in order for this to work. You have to walk through the fear, or else nothing will change. I kept waiting for an event to happen, like I was going to be struck by lightning and get sober. I kept waiting for that moment to happen, but it never did. Just kept being pushed. I'll do it once I graduate. I'll do it after law school. I'll do it when I turn 25 or 20, whatever. It didn't happen until the pain and the suffering were great enough that the window appeared. The window is God. Us going through it is us. You either take that window because you don't know if you're going to get another one. Some people get one. Some people might get a second or a third at some point in their journey when the stars align. That's when you have to make a decision to take it or not. Because you might not get another one. And I don't care if you're 16 or you're 60. It's never too early to get sober, and it's never too late to get sober.
Michael, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, the first thing they can do is go to michaelbarschi.com.
How do you spell Barschi?
B as in boy, ARSCHI.
michaelbarschi.com.
Yep. That's my website that has my private practice information, or Psychology Today is another one. But my email address, mbarschi@gmail.com, or you can call me. My cell phone, 917.
Well, we'll put it in the, you don't want that floating around out there.
No.
They'll go to michaelbarschi.com and connect with you.
Exactly.
Michael, thank you so much for coming on. Your story is going to help so many people. I am so grateful that, you came on, and we just recently reconnected after some time. And
I want to thank you, Kevin, because you are a gift as well. And I really, really miss all those years together in New York City, going to meetings together and at Intercare and working with you. And it's just funny how people come in and out of our lives.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of you and this journey that you're on professionally and personally.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you again.